Shane Van Gisbergen has exposed the advantage Austin Hill keeps carrying into their battles. Hill controls the air, crowds the restart lane, and forces SVG to react before the number 97 can use its speed. The word illegal now follows that advantage because Hill's number 33 failed inspection twice at North Wilkesboro, adding technical suspicion to a rivalry already overflowing with contact. Convenient timing, obviously. One driver keeps finding SVG's weak spots, while his car suddenly gives inspectors homework. The real question is whether Hill gained something prohibited or simply mastered NASCAR's gray areas better than his rival. NASCAR issued an inspection penalty, but that alone does not prove an illegal performance gain. Subscribe for the evidence behind the accusation. Tell us whether Hill is clever, careless, or crossing the line. This is how SVG exposed the pattern, why inspection matters, and what their next confrontation could reveal. Start with the official fact. Before the North Wilkesboro Cup race in July 2026, Austin Hill's number 33 Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet failed pre-race inspection twice. NASCAR responded by ejecting car chief Clay Alexander Jr. and removing the team's pit stall selection. Those consequences were real. However, NASCAR did not announce that Hill possessed an illegal engine, forbidden aerodynamic device, or proven speed advantage. That distinction is essential. Inspection failure means the car did not pass the required process within the permitted attempts. It does not automatically identify a sinister component hiding beneath the bodywork. Teams can fail measurements, correct the issue, and return. NASCAR escalates penalties after repeated failures because preparation matters, and because letting teams play endless inspection roulette would turn the garage into a casino. Yet context made this failure explosive. Hill and Van Gisbergen already carried a rivalry stretching across multiple seasons, racing series, and increasingly expensive pieces of sheet metal. Every restart between them looked personal. Every block collected history. When the number 33 then failed inspection twice, supporters of SVG did not see routine procedure. They saw another entry in a file already thick with receipts. The feud began taking shape at Circuit of the Americas in 2024. Hill stayed attached to SVG's bumper during an overtime restart and moved into the lead after Van Gisbergen ran wide. Shane later used his bumper against Hill in turn 15. Kyle Larson slipped past both drivers and won, while SVG received a 30-second penalty for shortcutting the course and fell down the order. Neither man considered the matter settled. Sonoma supplied the next chapter 2 months later. Hill controlled a late restart, SVG attacked through the opening corners, and contact sent Hill wide before Shane drove on to victory. Hill offered restrained comments, then delivered a much less restrained one-finger review during the cool-down lap. Apparently, post-race analysis becomes extremely concise when only one digit is required. Van Gisbergen answered by following Hill during his celebration and waving after passing him. Later, Shane said both drivers had taken a potential victory from the other. That sentence established the rivalry's operating rule. Each man believed he possessed a receipt. Neither seemed interested in store credit. Their paths collided again during the 2026 Cup season. At Naval Base Coronado, Hill slid into Trackhouse rookie Connor Zilisch on a restart while they fought near the front. The contact triggered a multi-car crash that eliminated Zilisch and SVG, damaging a major opportunity for both Trackhouse cars. Hill, Van Gisbergen, and several others left with ruined afternoons. Chicagoland transformed simmering resentment into open hostility. On lap 48, SVG hit the rear of Hill's number 33 while they battled through turns 3 and 4. Hill struck the outside wall and suffered terminal damage. Before retiring, he sideswiped the number 97 under caution. NASCAR later reviewed data, radio transmissions, camera angles, and previous laps before issuing no penalty to either driver. SVG explained that he was searching for the bottom because his car was tight and he needed clean air. According to Shane, Hill chopped across his nose and reached the wall after the contact. Hill offered the opposite interpretation, saying he had been entering normally and moving down to block SVG's air when Shane appeared to accelerate. That disagreement exposes the advantage more clearly than any accusation. Hill admitted the central tactic. He was blocking the air. In the next-gen car, aerodynamic positioning can change how a trailing machine turns before physical contact ever occurs. A driver controlling clean air can weaken a rival's front grip, disrupt corner entry, and force an earlier decision. But here is what most people miss. Hill's greatest advantage may not be hidden under the hood. It may be his willingness to weaponize every legal inch until SVG has nowhere clean to place the nose. Dirty air is not a magical force field. A leading car disturbs airflow, leaving the follower with less dependable aerodynamic performance. When the front loses authority, the trailing driver may describe the car as tight because it refuses to rotate through the corner. Extra steering generates scrub and heat. Delayed throttle costs exit speed. One blocked lane can therefore damage several phases of the lap. Hill understands that sequence. His move toward SVG's preferred air did not require a faster engine or secret suspension part. Position created the benefit. By occupying the lower lane at the correct moment, he forced Shane to lift, remain in disturbed air, or attempt a shrinking opening. Hill asked the question. SVG answered with commitment, and the wall supplied a brutally final punctuation mark. That does not make the maneuver illegal. Blocking air is ordinary NASCAR racecraft, particularly when drivers battle in traffic. Hill himself described it as something everyone does. The controversy comes from timing, repetition, and the tiny border between controlling a lane and reacting so late that the following driver has no reasonable escape. Rules cannot eliminate every aggressive judgment. Officials study whether a move violates a defined standard, creates an intentional wreck, or involves prohibited equipment. Competitors study something simpler. What can be done without losing the position or receiving a penalty? Those are not always identical questions. NASCAR's gray area lives between them, renting expensive property. North Wilkesboro added a technical shadow. Two failed inspection attempts suggested the number 33 arrived outside an accepted measurement or configuration before corrections. NASCAR imposed the prescribed operational consequences. Without an official disclosure identifying the failed station or component, nobody can responsibly connect that failure to Hill's aerodynamic battles with SVG. Still, perception matters in a rivalry. If a driver repeatedly gains through precise air control and his car later struggles through inspection, suspicion writes its own screenplay. Fans connect scenes before officials finish checking the projector. SVG does not need to accuse Hill of a specific modification for the pattern to become uncomfortable. Racing history, aggressive positioning, and inspection trouble already sit beside one another. The term illegal advantage therefore contains two separate allegations. First, did Hill's car possess something outside the rules that could improve performance? Available public information does not establish that. Second, does Hill exploit tactics that feel illegal to SVG's supporters even when officials permit them? Their battles provide abundant evidence for that emotional argument. Inspection itself works as a sequence, not a courtroom verdict delivered at the first station. NASCAR checks whether cars conform to required dimensions and approved configurations before competition. A failure sends the team back for corrections and another attempt. Repetition triggers escalating consequences because every extra pass consumes official time and raises concern that the entry was not prepared within tolerance. For Hill, losing pit stall selection carried a competitive cost. Pit location can influence how cleanly a driver enters his box, departs into traffic, and avoids congestion during crowded stops. Ejecting the car chief also removed a senior operational figure from the event. Those penalties mattered during a major cup weekend even without NASCAR identifying a performance-enhancing secret. The timing nevertheless sharpened SVG's argument in the court of public opinion. Hill had spent weeks creating trouble for Trackhouse, then arrived with a car that needed multiple inspection attempts. Fans naturally asked whether aggressive tactics were being supported by aggressive engineering. Suspicion accelerated because the rivalry supplied motive before the inspection supplied mystery. However, engineering tolerances do not explain Hill's decisions behind the wheel. A measurement cannot choose a restart lane. Body dimensions cannot extend a block after SVG commits. Whatever caused the failures, Austin still generated his most visible edge through timing and positioning. That is why the inspection story adds heat without solving the technical case. Separating those claims protects the story from collapsing. If inspection later reveals a name violation, the technical question changes immediately. Until then, the strongest case concerns behavioral advantage. Hill knows SVG will attack visible space. He knows Shane values clean air when the number 97 becomes tight. Most importantly, he appears willing to close that space at the last possible moment. Van Gisbergen's racing background makes the tactic especially effective. Supercars and road courses trained him to build passes through braking, rotation, and exit placement. NASCAR ovals hills add sustained aerodynamic dependence and lane manipulation at speed. A gap can be geometrically open, but aerodynamically poisoned. Shane sees pavement. Hill sees leverage. Experience also changes risk calculation. Hill has spent years learning how NASCAR drivers defend restarts, side draft rivals, and establish ownership of a lane. SVG remains a rapid student, but his instinct often favors decisive commitment. Against a rival carrying old grievances, that commitment becomes predictable. Hill can move first because he trusts Shane to keep coming. That was visible in their explanations at Chicagoland. Hill said he moved to block the air. SVG said he aimed for clean air. Both descriptions can be accurate simultaneously. Hill tried to remove the resource Shane needed while Shane attacked before it vanished. Their cars met where two legitimate intentions became incompatible. NASCAR's review matters here. Officials examined more than the final impact and found insufficient proof that the incident was completely intentional and worthy of punishment. They still arranged a meeting with both drivers because no penalty did not mean no danger. The sanctioning body wanted to prevent the dispute from boiling over at Echo Park or beyond. During that meeting, Van Gisbergen believed he showed more remorse. He later said he did not want the rivalry to escalate and acknowledged that he had more to lose while competing for a chase position. Then he added the line defining his posture. He was not going to back down. Diplomacy had entered the room, but apparently it forgot to bring surrender. Here is the irony Hill cannot ignore. Every aggressive block teaches SVG another oval lesson, and every inspection failure encourages the garage to examine the number 33 more closely. Hill's advantage works only while the cost remains favorable. If he controls SVG's air and keeps the position, he wins the exchange. If he moves too late and receives contact, the number 33 may pay with damaged equipment. Chicagoland demonstrated that reversal. Hill attempted to dictate the lane, but his own race ended while Shane continued to 25th. The balance becomes even more dangerous because their feud carries memory. A routine block between neutral drivers may disappear by the next corner. The same move between Hill and SVG retrieves Coda, Sonoma, Coronado, Pocono, and Chicagoland from the mental archive. Each new incident arrives with witnesses from the old one. Neither driver competes against a blank page. Trackhouse can counter Hill's advantage without asking NASCAR for special protection. Better qualifying would place SVG ahead of the number 33 and reduce his exposure to defensive air control. Stronger communication can identify when tight handling comes from setup and when traffic creates it. Spotter guidance can warn Shane when Hill is shaping a block before the lane fully closes. Patience offers the most difficult solution. SVG can refuse a poisoned opening, preserve the nose, and attack after Hill compromises his own exit. That approach sounds simple from a sofa located safely below racing speed. Inside the car, surrendering half a length to a rival with years of receipts feels like volunteering to lose. Nevertheless, delayed aggression may become the sharper weapon. Hill and RCR face a different responsibility. Passing inspection cleanly removes oxygen from the equipment allegation. Repeated. Failures invite questions even when the eventual car satisfies officials. In a rivalry already interpreted through suspicion, technical sloppiness becomes reputational fuel. The team cannot complain about smoke while repeatedly arriving with matches. NASCAR must preserve clarity as well. Inspection penalties should communicate what can be publicly disclosed without compromising proprietary details. Fans do not need every setup measurement, but vague failure reports allow imagination to outrun evidence. Clear enforcement protects competitors who were merely out of tolerance and exposes teams that pursued a genuine prohibited advantage. The garage will watch how Hill races SVG next. An early block may be ordinary defense. Repeated late moves will strengthen the argument that he deliberately targets Shane's dependence on clean air. Another failed inspection would intensify equipment questions. A clean weekend with respectful racing could cool everything, although these two have shown limited enthusiasm for boring conclusions. 4 details deserve attention. Watch Hill's lane change relative to SVG's closing speed. Notice whether the number 33 moves before Shane commits or after the run becomes unavoidable. Listen for Trackhouse reporting tightness in dirty air. Finally, separate official inspection findings from social media theories wearing counterfeit credentials. Those details decide whether this is innovation, intimidation, or illegality. NASCAR rewards drivers who manipulate air and restarts better than their opponents. It punishes equipment outside prescribed limits. Confusing those categories may create a louder story, but understanding them reveals the real competitive battle. SVG has exposed something important even without producing a secret part for the cameras. Hill's edge comes from combining NASCAR experience, fearless lane control, and an intimate understanding of Shane's reactions. Inspection trouble made that edge look suspicious. The rivalry made suspicion irresistible. Yet the most dangerous weapon remains visible through the windshield. That should concern Austin Hill. Technical advantages can be corrected by officials. Psychological advantages disappear when the opponent recognizes them. SVG now understands that Hill is not merely defending asphalt. He is attacking airflow, timing, and expectation. Once Shane anticipates the move, Hill must either block earlier, concede the lane, or accept another collision. The next restart will expose more than either interview can. Watch who chooses the lane, who controls the air, and who forces the other driver to react. North Wilkesboro gave NASCAR an inspection problem. Chicagoland gave officials a rivalry problem. Together, they created the accusation hanging over the number 33. Nothing publicly released proves Hill raced with an illegal performance advantage, but the failed inspections prevent the question from disappearing quietly. Meanwhile, Hill's legal advantage remains obvious. He knows how to make SVG uncomfortable before contact. He understands which lane Shane wants and how urgently he will chase clean air. That knowledge has repeatedly placed Austin at the center of Trackhouse trouble, though it has also placed his own equipment directly in danger. Van Gisbergen does not need to win a war of accusations. He needs to remove Hill's ability to predict him. One patient restart, one protected tire run, or one perfectly timed crossover can reverse the entire matchup. Then the driver who controlled every question must suddenly produce a new answer. Drop 97 if SVG has exposed Hill's real advantage, or 33 if Austin is simply racing smarter. Subscribe because their next restart may settle nothing and reveal everything. Hill's inspection failure created suspicion. SVG's response created pressure. Now every inch between them looks like evidence.